This is Part 2, Episode 132. This forbidden spell didn't have any direct destructive power, but its effects were even more terrifying. It covered an extremely large scale, and even affected the powerhouses with cultivation comparable to Sytry herself. In the case that this forbidden spell was allowed to be cast, unless one's willpower and mental force reached a sufficient level, that person would undoubtedly be lured. After final completion of the spell, even females will sink into a state of lust, and face the final inescapable outcome, finally dying, burning with desire. The Exorcist Mountain Pass was already in chaos, and just like them, the demon army was in a state of chaos. At this point, no victor seemed likely to come out from this battle. The final verdict would only be a state of mutual destruction. Right at this time, a lofty golden brilliance suddenly lit up the sky. The instant it flared up, Sytry finally reached her limits and her slaughter's realm concluded, as her body fell downwards. A soft golden light caught her, stopping her from falling on the fortress. That was Han Yu. Han Yu was now in an extremely bad state. Both his eyes colored in red. After catching her, unable to even ask about her well-being, he immediately threw her on the Exorcist Mountain Pass second floor's commander's terrace. The fortress was far too dangerous. Many thousands of men were burning in desire there. If they caught sight of such weakened Kia, who knew what could happen to her? Han Yu's cultivation was also at the 7th step, but his willpower was far above the powerhouses of the same rank. His gifted talents, including his innate internal spiritual energy of 80, manifested without a doubt at this time. He also saw that lofty golden brilliance flare up, and had a single wish at this time. He could only believe in the owner of that light, that he would once again turn the situation around. Right, that golden light was unleashed by Long Haochen. The instant Sytry completed her forbidden spell, the sun on the distant horizon had finally showed its face. Dawn came to a conclusion, and at the approach of the early morning, Long Haochen finally felt a reaction from the divine snail shield. Immediately, it erupted with an incomparable brightness. The spiritual Highlandized energy that Long Haochen had continuously poured, and hadn't provoked any reaction from the divine snail shield until now, was only stockpiled inside the divine snail shield of sun and moon until now. And the instant sun and moon finished crossing, Long Haochen regained control of the divine snail shield, and all the stored spiritual Highlandized energy finally broke out all around. An intense multicolored light rose to the sky, and this time, Long Haochen immediately felt that he had entered a fantastic state of connection with the divine snail of sun and moon. Without need for active reflection, he came to sense the uses and effects of the divine snail shield of sun and moon. As he pressed on the shield, that multicolored light was shot towards the gigantic Sytry. Her expression finally changed. She had been paying attention to Long Haochen's movement all this time, and upon seeing the burst of multicolored light from his divine tool, she immediately made a response. A pink radiance was shot from her demon god pillar, violently striking the light originating from the divine snail shield of sun and moon. The gigantic figure executing the celestial dance of lust abruptly became illusory, and the frantic soldiers and officers came to a brief standstill. But the next instant, the figure recondensed, and its dance became all the more ardent. Impossible to stop. Long Haochen was submerged in his thoughts. He knew that his current cultivation couldn't compare with Sytry's. Just like he had the divine tool called Divine Snail Shield of Sun and Moon, Sytry had her demon god pillar. Although demon god pillars were only similar to divine tools, mostly aimed at amplifying the powers of a demon god and protecting him or her, this wasn't something he could withstand with his current cultivation. What's to be done? An image? Long Haochen trembled, having finally come up with a solution. At that very moment, the upper bodies of the soldiers on the fortress were almost all bare, and they appeared to be tearing apart their own bodies with their utmost. Many of them were dripping with blood, and some already had bones showing through, but their state of mind only kept worsening. Outside the Exorcist Mountain Pass, the assassin powerhouse's slaughter had finally reached its peak. The multicolored light which had shot out vanished abruptly, and Long Haochen immediately flew to the top of the fortress, looking straight at the distant celestial dance of lust. What was an incomparable enticement for the soldiers of the Exorcist Mountain Pass didn't affect Long Haochen in the slightest. Through the mask of Long Haochen's golden foundation armor, his golden eyes were exposed to Sytry's sight. Devoid of any impurity, they didn't show the slightest desire due to Sytry's celestial dance of lust. Sytry was in total shock. Could it be that this human knight doesn't have the slightest dark side? But lust and desire are humans' most primitive drives. Why isn't he affected at all? At this time, Sytry found out to her stupor that these limpid golden eyes were thoroughly engraved in her mind. SYTRY's field of expertise was illusion attacks, in other words, psychic magic. As a user of such magic, a nemesis was an enemy who wouldn't be affected by her psychic spells. Long Haochen's crystal-clear eyes had swayed her heart, and immediately, her celestial dance of lust's effect started to lessen significantly. No good. SYTRY cried out secretly, and forced herself to keep her calm. Shutting her eyes, she stopped looking at Long Haochen, but her heart was still disturbed. Deep inside, the image of these golden eyes kept twinkling, and she couldn't escape it even when shutting her eyes. Her heart having been marked, unless SYTRY killed or subdued Long Haochen, her cultivation would surely be greatly affected by that blow. Naturally, Long Haochen didn't know about that change in SYTRY. His left hand thumped on his chest, and multicolored light started spreading out all around him, the signature of the divine snail shield of sun and moon. Only, it was currently spreading out inexhaustibly all around the fortress. The spreading of this light immediately blocked the view of the celestial dance of lust, as well as that pink light and aura. Everywhere the multicolored light passed, the frantic movements of the soldiers slowed down. Only, because the intense lust was still present, they had yet to recover their whole awareness for a moment. Last time on the dragon-resisting mountain pass, the divine snail shield was affected by the two fiend commanders' special technique and autonomously transferred Long Haochen's spiritual energy to itself to temporarily unleash its might as a divine tool. But this time, with the help of Star King, Long Haochen was the one who activated the power of the divine snail shield, and his spiritual energy was compressed to a great extent until the time that the sun and moon crossed. While before it had amplified Long Haochen's strength, now the divine snail shield of sun and moon was releasing all the compressed spiritual highlandized energy. Therefore, its power was even stronger than back in the dragon-resisting mountain pass, and was under Haochen's control. From afar, the fortress looked as if it was completely enveloped in a layer of multicolored light. Soft golden radiance was undulating in the air, forcibly blocking the celestial dance of lust. More astonishingly, this multicolored light unexpectedly reflected it like a mirror, refracting the image of SYTRY's celestial dance of lust towards the already disarrayed demon troops from the sky. This seemed unimportant, but the already completed celestial dance of lust had even greater effects on demons than on humans. After all, the lower-ranked demons' intelligence was quite limited, and their instincts were a lot stronger. For a moment, the demon army was drizzling with a layer of purple. The powerhouses of the Assassin Temple were also startled, all looking together in the direction of the Exorcist Mountain Pass fortress. The lustrous multicolored golden light that came to their sight filled them with deep shock, and they saw in the meantime SYTRY's celestial dance of lust. Even with these assassin powerhouses' cultivation, the sight of the celestial dance of lust had immediate effects on them. However, as highly profound cultivators and very aged characters, the speed of their lusts igniting wasn't too fast. Xingyu whistled, and the few assassin powerhouses immediately turned away, before fleeing through an empty space. Since the Exorcist Mountain Pass crisis was relieved, they didn't need to keep staking their lives here any longer. Most of all, the priority was to shelter themselves from that forbidden spell's influence. No matter their type, all the demons that suffered the effects from the celestial dance of lust immediately became frantic. Amongst them, the most affected were the dual-bladed demons serving as cannon fodder. Everywhere SYTRY's celestial dance of lust came into view, large expanses of dual-bladed demons immediately died with their limbs cut off. Their juices were scattering all around, and an extremely intense stench spread to the battlefield. This was the might of that forbidden spell. The effects sustained by the Exorcist Mountain Pass were now sent back with several-fold amplification to the demon armies. For better or worse, humans were, after all, intelligent beings, and their self-control was a lot greater than demons. Although the damage they sustained in the short term was not small, they hadn't completely gone out of control yet. But the celestial dance of lust was just beyond terrifying to demons. This was also the reason why the demon gods never dared look straight at the emo demon god. No good. SYTRY let out a low shout. Her hands rapidly formed a seal, to dispel her own forbidden spell as fast as possible. She didn't know how Long Haochen managed to reflect that, but the situation in front of her eyes was a matter of fact. If things went on, at least half of the demon troops would be buried because of her own forbidden spell. Long Haochen was holding the divine snail shield of sun and moon strenuously. In the meantime, the emo demon god very rapidly dispelled her forbidden spell. Still, it deserved being called such. In case of full activation, stopping it wasn't so easy, and required time. The soldiers in the fortress were under the divine snail shield of sun and moon's protection, and gradually came back to their senses under the stimulation of the cold rain. After these intense surges of lust, they became extremely weak. Many warriors were injured due to the wounds they had inflicted upon themselves in their frantic state, and some died due to blood loss. But most of the soldiers were able to keep some control. Even so, the soldiers that were still standing on their feet were extremely scarce. Only the most powerful ones were still able to persevere. One couldn't help but notice that the brilliant Angel Knight regiment was in a very good state. It wasn't that they had a greater resistance against Swytry's magic, but the key was that they were clad in extremely thick armors. Taking off these armors was not an easy matter at all, and that's all the more the case in states of frenzy. Therefore, their injuries were the least, and very few of them died. But they had for the most part lost their fighting strength. And if the celestial dance of lust had continued for longer, they also would have hardly avoided the fate of death while burning with desire. Right now, in front of these brilliant angel knights, as Long Haochen rode Star King and spread out that multicolored golden light with his left arm lifted, he appeared just like their savior. That's the Saint Knight head, their Saint Knight head. Right now, the Saint Knight head was using his powerful strength to ward off the enemy's forbidden spell. For a moment, every brilliant angel knight was filled with great reverence. Even if they had to crawl, each of them forced himself to make a knight salute towards Long Haochen's direction. Kia was standing up with difficulty, with the support of her mother. At the sight of the dazzling multicolored golden light, she couldn't help but let her tears flow. He didn't fail to live up to her expectations, once again saving them from the desperate crisis, and helped the assassin temple to survive the most fatal attack they had ever suffered. Maybe the effects of reflection were coincidental, but no one could refute that the Scion of Light had been brought by Providence. Who else could produce such a coincidence? The golden light shattered, and its multicolored radiance scattered in the sky. From the time Long Haochen enveloped the fortress of the Exorcist Mountain Pass with his light, to now, when he and Star King could be seen falling down, only 10 or so minutes had passed. But during these mere 10 minutes or so, he had saved the whole Exorcist Mountain Pass. Afar, the celestial dance of lust was slowly dissipating. Because of its forceful termination, the emo demon god Swytry was still suffering severe backlash. At this very moment, the corners of her mouth were flushing with pink blood, and her gaze was thrown at Long Haochen on the Exorcist Mountain Pass fortress. Long Haochen was also looking in her direction. Swytry was once again shaken to see that even if his body was now in a very weak state, and his spiritual energy greatly overdrafted, at the time he landed onto the fortress, Long Haochen's both eyes were still limpid, and devoid of any impurity. Swytry let out another stuffy groan, spurting out some blood. "We are withdrawing. Give the order of retreat." Actually, the demons had been escaping in panic since long before. The charges of the assassin powerhouses sank the demon army into a total state of panic, and the influence of Swytry's celestial dance of lust didn't make things any better. The units were trampling into each other, and thereby one could see that the demon armies were utterly defeated. The demon army was actually not so powerful. The demons' ability to maintain command of their army was not the best. Individually, the demons were strong, their fighting instincts unmatched by humans. But because of that, moving such an army wasn't an easy thing to do. After suffering several critical attacks and effects, even the demon god's orders were unable to totally mobilize them. "What are you still waiting for? Fire, with full power!" Returning to his senses, Shen Lingxin shouted so loud that it made his voice hoarse. Right now, his body was still shaking because of the emotional excitation. At the time he had sobered up, Long Haochen's multicolored light had vanished. Looking at the latter as he fell on the fortress, his mood was as one may well imagine. His son-in-law had once again just saved the Exorcist Mountain Pass. The demon's state of disorder could be seen right in front of his eyes. If they didn't finish off the beaten enemy now, when would they be able to? But unfortunately, due to the effects of the emo demon god Swytry's heavenly dance of lust, a lot of people had yet to come back to their senses. And even if they did, they would be in a very poor state, and as a result, only a few magic cannons could really be fired this time. But the fact that the Exorcist Mountain Pass couldn't launch an effective counterattack didn't mean that the Assassin Temple couldn't. Sheng Yu, who had escaped just before, now brought a group of powerhouses from the Assassin Temple to launch the counterattack. They weren't a lot, but every one of them was an absolute elite. Furthermore, the reversal of the situation enabled Sheng Yu to recover his calm. He didn't lead the assassin powerhouses to once again attack the demon army deep inside, but focused on beheading the frenzied demons on the edges of their formation. The 6 demon gods were putting all their energy into reassembling their panic-stricken troops and couldn't attend to them. Like that, the demon troops which had suffered the effects from the heavenly dance of lust were cut like wheat in front of Sheng Yu's group. Although the battle was still unfinished, these assassin powerhouses were all foreseeing an unprecedentedly total victory to take place this day. Han Yu returned alongside Long Haochen, and shouted to Shen Lingxin, Senior Chief, please bring Kia here. We have a way to accelerate the recovery of her spiritual energy. The light blessing ability naturally didn't only affect Long Haochen and Kia. Star King and Shen Lingxin, as well as Han Yu and the nearby soldiers and officers were all also enveloped. Shen Lingxin felt the changes in his internal spiritual energy, secretly full of shock. Is that the power of a spiritual stove? But what kind of spiritual stove is that? In his memories, there existed no such light elemental spiritual stoves. Such a massive ability of recovery was enough to match a first-tier spiritual stove. It looks like I am really outdated. Nowadays youngsters are already reaching such levels of strength. Under the effects of the spiritual stove of blessing of light, Long Haochen's weakened state was coming back to normal. Star King's state was also greatly ameliorated. Kia gradually came back to her senses, but finding out that she was upon Long Haochen's bosom, she once again shut her eyes. After having lost her memories, she also lost that strong personality she used to have, and she had more moments simply being nothing more than a delicate girl. In her present frail condition, she needed a warm embrace to rely on even more. This battle didn't last for much longer, but the resistance of the Exorcist Mountain Pass had a decisive effect on the Holy War. Not only were the greatest part of the demons injured or killed, but more importantly, their morale had been struck like never before. To the Exorcist Mountain Pass, this was a thorough and complete victory. For rather low losses, they had inflicted a crushing defeat on the demons. Adding further the consecutive deaths of 2 demon gods, the Exorcist Mountain Pass' perpetually inferior position had finally gained a qualitative change, sending the message that they won't necessarily fear such all-out attacks. After a bit more than an hour, the demon army was finally done retreating, and in front of the Exorcist Mountain Pass only demon corpses were left. The soldiers that had the strength for it were commanded by Shen Lingxin to retrieve the corpses and sweep the battlefield clean. The demon corpses were gathered, and immediately set to flames after their magical crystals were retrieved. This avoided the spread of a plague from these corpses while cutting off one of the demon's sources of food. After the work of gathering went until the evening, they were finally done with that battle. Far off, the demon armies which had assembled didn't even have many tents and provisions left. Their supplies were so scarce that it actually became a miserable sight to behold. This was a decisive victory, which brought an unprecedented rise to the soldiers' morale. The weak and injured were rapidly recovering, and large amounts of magical crystals were offered as supplies for the magic cannons to regain their destructive power. In the following half-year's time, the Exorcist Mountain Pass kept a strong bearing against the demon threat. Shen Yu personally commanded the elites from the Assassin Temple a few more consecutive times for night raids against the demons, retreating every time after just a few attacks. Although the damage thus inflicted to the demons wasn't much, the destruction of their tents and units unsettled them. In shortage of resources on the rear, and with the soldiers totally devoid of morale, SYTRY had no choice but to command their entire army to pull back 25 more kilometers to pull apart from the Exorcist Mountain Pass. Also, at this time came batches of all new supplies as well as 30,000 more soldiers to the Exorcist Mountain Pass as reinforcements, giving new breath to the Exorcist Mountain Pass, to borrow Shen Yu's words. In the current situation, the Exorcist Mountain Pass would have no issue with defense for several more years. Furthermore, they could now launch a counterattack against the demons at any time. Of course, this was under the premise that no demon reinforcements had come. Would they have reinforcements coming up? It was certainly possible, but also unlikely. The start of the Holy War also placed a massive burden on the demon side. They had put almost all their forces to use for the sake of pressuring the 6 great human forts at the same time. A year and a half's battles depleted both the demon and the human side's forces to a very great extent. The demons obviously had some backup forces in reserve, and their most powerful Devil Dragon Clan, Moon Clan, and Star Clan had yet to join the battle, but these were their hidden trumps. If these trump cards are revealed like that, it will mean that things have come down to an unreconcilable state, where one of the parties must die for the other to stop fighting. Would the Demon God Emperor really allow that? Furthermore, although the demon armies suffered an unprecedented blow and no longer had the strength to break through the fort, they had enough forces for defense. However, the present forces on the Exorcist Mountain Pass, in case of a direct fight on a plain field, were not enough to have an easy battle. In a road inside the mountain range, Long Haochen and Kia was seated on Star King's back, with Han Yu on the side. The 3 of them were looking into the distance toward the Exorcist Mountain Pass. Kia's eyes were hazy with tears for a long time. Nestling against Long Haochen's embrace, her body was lightly trembling. She couldn't forget the expressions her great-grandfather and parents had as the time for her departure approached. Because they couldn't keep down their feelings, they didn't even see her off. The Exorcist Mountain Pass situation having already stabilized, the time for their departure had come. Long Haochen held her tight, lowered his head, and held her head softly. "We will be back." "Yeah." Giving a light nod, Kia nibbled her lips. "Let's go." She feared that if she didn't go now, she would perhaps really have the urge to rush to the Exorcist Mountain Pass. The final outcome of the War of the Exorcist Mountain Pass was unpredictable. Even though Long Haochen had not been killing any enemies in that last battle, Kia and him had undoubtedly been useful. Kia was immediately announced to be the next successor for the Assassin Temple, and Long Haochen gained supreme honor, honored as Hall Master for the Assassin Temple. This honor did not receive any objection because Long Haochen just did far too much for the Assassin Temple. By relying on the Divine Snail Shield's reflection, he saved them from the desperate crisis, turning the tides completely, and inflicting massive damage to the demons, while avoiding the destruction of the Exorcist Mountain Pass. One could say that he had saved the Exorcist Mountain Pass, as well as the Assassin Temple. Being honored as Hall Master was simply just desserts for such a contribution, and obtained in unanimous approbation. In addition to that, his relationship with Kia made Long Haochen's newly made reputation in the Exorcist Mountain Pass rise even above Shang Yu's. The name of the 12th Golden Knight was memoized by all the officers and soldiers, and this Saint Knight had become an eternal comrade and close family of the Assassin Temple. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.